this really is sharing, especially given that it's us, it's a handful of us. So I like to lead this one off, and this actually evolved out of a series of conversations that I had with my colleagues when I joined Improving, and I've been with the company for about 2 years now. And we were talking about working in the agile space and my experiences in the military, especially along the lines of how teaming works. And I thought long and hard about it because I went, there's a lot of things in the military that can translate to what we do in the private sector. There's a lot of things that don't. But the teaming dynamic is one of those things. And I know a lot of companies work at this very diligently. Other companies are like, they pay lip service. It's like, yeah, whatever, y'all are a team. Go figure out what you're going to do. But I decided to boil it down to, okay, I've seen great teams. I've seen really poor teams. But what are some of the things that play into how these great teams or how even good solid teams work? And I reflected on anti-patterns because it's easy to identify the right behavior. It's harder to identify behavior that breaks down that trust among the members of the team. And so way back in the day, on board my first submarine, which was the USS Archerfish, it was a fast attack submarine. I had this auxiliary machinist mate. His name is Don. And Don was probably the most phenomenal repair person and fabricator I have ever met. I mean, the guy actually built I think it was a seawater flange for an auxiliary seawater system that was not in the supply system. And we were already deployed into the Mediterranean doing special missions, and we had a special operations unit attached to us. So everything that we were doing was of critical national importance. We get to the tender, they don't have the part, we're scrambling to figure out. Don literally takes the busted seawater fitting, draws a blueprint, goes down to the machine shop, mills a fitting. And I'm thinking to myself, this guy is phenomenal. And to the point where by the time he was done, and I was looking at him as a role model, by the time he was done, he had earned 3 Navy Achievement medals and his promotion while he was on board the submarine. I went, whoa, this guy like walks on water. Now, and this is where we get into the discussion around the team dynamics. There's a dark side to that. And this is where I failed to realize at the time that even though Don was a hero at the right time and in the right place, he was really acting as a one-man show. And he was getting the bulk of the recognition as a result. And a lot of people in his division who I knew where I sensed were equally as deserving, just they weren't getting the spotlight. And I was a junior sailor, and I wanted to have people that I could look up to and go, oh, I'd like to be like them. So what sort of behavior are they exhibiting? What sort of things are they doing that would help me be successful? And I didn't realize it at the time until years later. I was looking at the way that Don was saving the day in those particular instances versus others who were doing similar things. And I recognized in hindsight that he was exhibiting a hero behavior, something that, was working against building and maintaining and sustaining team trust. And I thought about it and I went, okay, this probably isn't the right way to do it. So I started looking for people who did build, maintain, and sustain team trust. And I came to the conclusion that, I'd rather be the person who is lifting others up by sharing what I know than being the person who's always looking for the spotlight, And that's how this whole topic of, sorry, I can't hear you over my own awesomeness, how being a hero of Erodes Team Trust came about. And the intent of all of this is really to kind of look at these behavior patterns that are not necessarily bright and clear, that you get a sense of them, but you can't put your finger on the pulse and go, "Ooh, yeah, that's an anti-pattern. That's something that's going to put people, create friction unnecessarily." So, with that said, I want to take a look at this arc, because I've looked at my experiences in the military, and now I've started to shift them to say, okay, these are the things that we can look for in the business world that may tend to lend themselves to, one type of behavior, or hopefully the opposite, which is really that behavior that builds up trust and capability within the teams. I was a firm believer early on that, if you embrace policy, process, and procedure, you're going to be successful. And I saw to a certain extent in my own career that was the case. And in the military, there's a lot of there's culturally this ethos around selfless service and always executing to successfully achieve the goal. Mission accomplishment, especially in that box of the 3 Ps, that was determined as being successful. Now, when I retired out of the reserve in 2016 and I didn't have that structure, I began to realize that, okay, so I got to this point, but here over at Verizon, say, I didn't have all the policies, processes, and procedures to guide behavior and to help me coach my team to success. And it began to dawn on me that, oh, by the way, you know what? Especially in the private sector, maybe this really isn't, this isn't, the formula for success. And so that caused me to do some soul searching. And of course, I don't know how you guys are, but when I go and do soul searching, I'm really looking for that Zen moment where, enlightenment happens around me and I'm going, oh, so this is what I was supposed to learn. So, time has kind of flowed like a winding stream, and there's a lot of things that have been revealed to me over the course of time that come from my time in the submarine force, in addition to supporting special operations units. And one of the things that I recognized dynamically in those environments is that the policies and processes and procedures in submarines are for safe operating, because they learned the hard way early on. When you don't have all of this stuff written down, people take shortcuts. And to operate nuclear reactors safely, you've got to have it all written down, especially in casualty response. Special operations, on the other hand, and I like to say it this way. So special operations is understanding all the guardrails that are in place with policies, processes, and procedures, and knowing when to step outside that box. So they know everything, chapter and verse, but they are very dynamic in the way that they reteam in order to accomplish a mission. And I went, ooh, whoa, okay. And this is where we fit kind of in a crisis situation in the business world. Normally it's day-to-day, steady state, but there are times where it's like, okay, how do we as a team accomplish something under a critical set of influences or under pressure? And I thought about that and I went, okay, there's going to have to be flex here. And so with special operations teams, everything is very flat. And in the agile space, we talk about self-organizing teams, cross-functional teams. Special operations are very much self-organizing and cross-functional. So they flex to wherever the need is, wherever the gap is. And I took that to heart and I went, yeah, okay. The more important thing coming out of that is that every one of those operators, regardless of where they're at, be it Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, they do not see themselves as being superior or inferior to one another. It's kind of like being the doctor, right? Every doctor graduates from med school or from dentistry school or from, you know, whatever that professional practice is. And regardless of where you're number one in your class or you're 150, every one of them is a doctor. And when you make the cut in the special operations community, every one of them's an operator. And I think that distinction is something that's critical, that I bring that lesson to the teams that I work with in the business world. So that's enough about me and my background and kind of where my history is and how it's informed me about, looking for these behaviors that really bring the team down. So the points are on the slide, or I should say the disclaimer is on the slide, because I do want everybody to laugh and have some fun and, nod, shake your head and go, yeah, that connects with me. I remember a time. The three key takeaways that we're going to cover are really how to recognize a hero complex, how to recognize that hero complex and the associated behavior, then stepping through to encouraging team enabling behavior, and finally cultivating that trust and developing the just-in-time heroes within the team. And by the way, I've got this really cool robotic camera, so occasionally if I do certain hand signals, it'll, like now it'll pan and tilt. So don't get freaked out about that as it's tracking me around my room, around my office. So if you happen to laugh, if you happen to have an aha moment, cool. My big takeaway for everybody is, I've made a certain number of mistakes and I've failed fabulously. So most of the lessons that I'm sharing with you are out of my personal experience. Do differently. And I tell our teenage daughters this: look, I'm sharing this stuff so that you can do differently. If you're gonna learn, I want you to learn by not repeating my stuff and doing it bigger in your own way. So, yeah, I led off with the story about Don, and he certainly wasn't my first encounter, let alone my last encounter. And I do encounter heroes. In fact, I'm dealing with a hero with my current client right now. And as I've learned watching and supporting teams, both in the military as well as in business, I realize that there are common indicators that go along with this hero complex. Now, you might be wondering, okay, so Tim, what is a hero complex? And I'm glad you're thinking that. So I want you to just take a moment here and kind of reflect on the last team or a team that you may be on, and consider these questions. Consider the person that acts as the go-to expert based on their knowledge, skills, and abilities. Reflect on how it felt to work with that person. Did that person answer all of your questions, kind of like a Google search or asking Siri on your iPhone? Did that person work tirelessly to meet a looming deadline? Did that person step into the midst of a crisis or chaos and bring order to the situation, ultimately saving the day? Did that person share their experience and teach the other team members and coach them to be better and more capable? So with those questions and that reflection in mind, I see two indicators of the hero complex potentially being these. You've got a team member who is not committed to the team and yet able to deliver amazing results while grumbling about the work that they're performing the entire time. And there's also an alternate, which is there's a team member who shows up at the right moment to complete the task at the razor's edge toward the end of the 11th hour of the time box, and that gets cheered for saving the day while not really showing up and being present to complete the work ahead of schedule. And in what we do in either the agile software development or the project management space, I'm sure that you've experienced that a couple of times, more than likely. So I look at those two things, and of course there's more that could be added into this, but those two things are the kind of the behaviors that really stand out for me. And they are the warning lights that, because I've seen them frequently, I look at it and I go, these are probably the things that are most prevalent and easiest to spot when it comes to that hero complex being played out. There also might be, and I'm saying this because I actually witnessed this one time. There might be a team member who creates a problem, recognizes the problem quickly, and then works tirelessly to solve the problem. Yeah, and that is the worst case scenario. And in the meanwhile, of course, that person is blaming the team for not catching the risk before it became an issue. So, I mean, again, I seriously had somebody on one of my teams do that, and I was like, okay, hopefully it's not a routine malicious behavior pattern, but unintentionally creating problems that only they can solve, and then complain about how they're always having to put out the fire, might be the hero complex. So it's worth noting that the hero complex can show up in subtle and less impactful ways, and certainly less extreme. And at times that the whole nuance in behavior can be really difficult to spot. It may show up as just casual comments, during a team call, where it's said with a smile and a gentle shake of the head, and that willingness to jump in with a quick fix. It's kind of almost like discounting the situation. The hero may write down all but one or two of the essential steps, accidentally or forgetfully leaving out the two most important things, or the most important steps or pieces of critical information in order to get the job done. If they're tasked with helping train other members of the team, they might run through their whole work process so quickly that somebody wished they had a pause button to go, oh, hey, I got a question. Because that information was flowing way too fast, and they were playing catch up the entire time and not really grasping what was being shared. Those are just a few examples of the more subtle indicators of that hero complex and the behavior. So I've given you kind of the bookends. Here over here is that worst case scenario. Over here is where it's like really disguised and stealthful, and so these actions, in a sense, lead to learned helplessness on teams. The teams become quite dependent on the hero to get the toughest work done, and that's not optimal. And it certainly isn't beneficial, and it's not efficient. I can say that from my life professionally, I unfortunately instilled a sense of learned helplessness with one of the teams when I was deployed the first time going to Afghanistan. Our team had actually been remissioned, and we had received orders for this new mission, but we didn't have a whole lot of detail going into what that was going to look like. So I decided to figure out what the mission set actually was and who the gaining command was, or I should say what the gaining command was, and where we were going to end up being located, and whether that leaving Kuwait to get to Bagram or Kabul or Kandahar or some other place. We really didn't know. So I used my network of contacts to get information and get into contact with the receiving command, and ultimately, got enough detail to arrange our flight plans. Now, I don't know if you can kind of extrapolate and go, yeah, there's probably a flaw there, and there was, because I created a problem due to the fact that I did this really without involving the rest of the team. And Boy, that was a big mistake. That was a huge learning opportunity for me. I should have asked for help and kept as many people in the loop as were interested in knowing what was going on. But I failed. I failed to notice that while I was very task focused towards achieving results, the team was information starved and sitting on the sidelines waiting to get into the game. In retrospect, I should have asked everyone for their assistance and asked each person to work on the problems that they felt most comfortable handling while enabling communication among the members of the team to grow and sustain trust among us. It made that entire team, and I think there was 12 or 13 of us in total, dependent upon me to solve every single thing that was coming up around that mission change. And I acted without providing concrete, actionable details around how we might, pivot. And in the meanwhile, I should have been working to gain the agreement, alignment, and support from those folks. And that lesson learned the hard way really has shaped my perception about being a hero and damaging trust while exercising leadership behavior. And by the way, I want to take a little bit of a sidebar here. Leadership is an emergent behavior that anyone on a team can demonstrate. In self-organizing and self-managing teams, demonstrating leadership can lead to team agility and increase team trust if everyone is invested in achieving the outcomes the team and the organization desire. One of my former IBM colleagues, Mo, said it something like this. He said, "We can agree and commit. We can disagree and commit. Either way, we need to commit and act." And between Mo and another one of our former colleagues, Jimmy, as well as John, the four of us, we figured it out. We figured out that this communication and lifting each other up and making sure everybody had the right information at the right time to take action, it made us successful, really successful. So the other part of this, and I've mentioned it, which is working to gauge team trust. The trust signals may be plain in here, plain to see and hear around whether or not the team has that trust. But oftentimes it might not be there. So one of the indicators is that the team really doesn't want to work with the hero. They kind of distance themselves, or they keep their distance. Or worse, the team is so fed up with that hero behavior that they actively work against the hero and the organization's goal. They're trying to sabotage it to make it plain, which is kind of crazy, but it happens. Yeah. So Omar,
I do have a question though, and following your same example of what you just said that you did, would it be right to assume that you did it more for the success of the mission than to actually become a hero, or to do it, or to think that you'll be a hero for that? Because I'm following what you're saying, but at the same time, I'm wondering, what if a person isn't doing it for what we would assume it's the hero complex? What if it's like, no, he just saw the deficiency and he said, okay, let me step up, let me get this and see if this helps everyone else. So I guess it would be, we would have to really look at it, or a case by case basis, to really understand if it's actually somebody trying to be the hero, somebody creating an issue to become the hero, and somebody who just wants to make sure, and somebody that just wants to make sure that things work the way that they're expected to.
Yeah, so the answer to that specific question was yes. I wanted to ensure mission success. So yeah, it was not a conscious act of trying to find the spotlight, trying to be the person who's winning the day. Yeah. But to your point, and this is where some of the subtle behavior comes in. Most of the time, especially when heroes are really, goal driven, mission focused, just wanting to take care and get the job done, they don't really understand how that kind of, like I said, it creates a learned helplessness. Well, so and so, they're really the most capable. I could never be as good as they are. All they're, death and taxes, right? The two most certain things in life. We're all going to move on, and this is where businesses really struggle. And I even saw a post today on LinkedIn about succession planning. How are we building capability within teams to ensure success for the long run? Especially if we've got well-meaning people who are not mentoring, training, supporting, being a backstop to the younger members of the team with less experience. And they don't even know it. That's the critical piece. And that's why my soul searching, it was tough. Because I had to look at myself in the mirror and go, am I doing this unintentionally? Yeah, I was. And now I talk about this in that context of, look, even the most well-meaning of us. So none of us are immune, really. Hey, James, did you want to say something? Because I get a sense that you've got something to add here.
Yeah, as I was listening to you, I understand the mission success part very clearly, because you just want to be able to move that project forward. You want to be able to say, on my resume, I've been able to complete X, Y, Z. But I'm also thinking about the psychology behind the distrust that goes along with that. And if you can speak to how often does that carry from project to project, so that you find yourself doing the hero work too often.
I think that yeah, you're gonna dislike me. It's my standard consulting answer for everything. It depends. Especially when we're talking about the psychological impact of our behavior and it moving with us. And I'm saying this because I had some mentors who were really tough on me in the military. They called the spade the spade. In fact, one of the stories I'm going to share here in just a slide or two is my best friend who called me out, and I didn't realize it. And I'm going to get to that real quick. Let me talk about this whole DDT and TED thing here. So this graphic is one of those things that I found to be completely eye-opening. And it actually comes from a book called The Power of TED, The Empowerment Dynamic by David Emerald. And our company actually has a very well-defined professional development growth path, and it starts at the consulting level and goes through the executive level. And so this is one of the books that's required reading out of a year-long, curriculum. And this triangle is really where most of us are oriented. We're playing one of these three roles in our life, both personally and professionally. You can be a rescuer, you can be a persecutor, or you can be a victim. And this is how we're just kind of naturally oriented most of the time. Now, TED turns this whole thing upside down. But again, this is, James, to your point, it's the self-awareness to recognize, oh crap, I am the one who is causing these problems because I am always coming in to put out the fire. And when we turn that upside down, now we've got the option of being a creator, of making the change and making things better, being a challenger, not in the sense of being antagonistic, but in the sense of, hey, have you considered this? Or what if we tried a safe to fail experiment and do things this way? You know, and in my favorite, which is where I get to work most of the time now, is in that coaching to go, look, I bear the battle scars of bad decisions. And what I really hope is that you will receive what I'm having to say. And I like the way that my dad framed it for me years ago. He said, son, it's like being taught how to fish. Okay? You go out, you catch your fish. What I'm sharing with you is that process of you eat the meat, you spit out the bones, and you put in your refrigerator or your freezer whatever remains for another day, because it's not always going to apply in one setting. And so I've looked at it, to your point, James, from the psychological standpoint, and I go, okay, what are some of these things that, we as human beings carry with us that kind of tend to move us in that direction? This is a very simple explanation of where this goes. We'll get to a couple of other graphics that have a little bit more detail, but this is rooted in many cases based on trauma, personal trauma. Fear and shame. Driven out of, what if I fail? Well, you tried, right? And hopefully you learned something out of that. But we carry this forward because oftentimes that's what we're taught. You got to be successful. You got to save the day. You got to be, but from a team dynamic, a lot of times, and this is where in special operations, why they go through so much rigorous physical training, because what it ultimately does is it breaks them down psychologically from whatever their individual capability is that they bring into the situation, and it resets them psychologically because it forces them to figure out how to work together, because they are run to a point of exhaustion day after day after day for weeks, and they're always being pushed. Okay, what are you going to do now? How are you going to make it to the next waypoint? How are you going to hit that beachhead and successfully take that beach in this drill? And slowly but surely, there are those folks who get it. It dawns on them. They're like, okay, me and the 10 people next to me, we got to figure it out for ourselves, because that's the only way we're going to get through this. Or they self-select and they drop out on the way. And this is the reason why the special operations community is very small. It's because something clicks and they're like, okay, I'm not a victim here. I chose to be here. So what am I going to have to do in order to successfully advance to the next stage? And who is aligned with me? Who collectively, who are we bringing with us? And so in certain cases, it may take a little bit of time in the chair. And I'll get to that, because I crossed that bridge when I didn't have the military to kind of give me an identity. So, I want to kind of wrap up this slide with a few takeaways, because within a team, and this is where you see kind of the you got your cause with a particular behavior, and here's the effect of it. The team members might become more absent than usual to meetings or work. They may withdraw or become disengaged in those conversations. Heck, they might even avoid conversations, especially with the hero. They may start avoiding other team members beyond the hero. That's kind of the telltale stuff that becomes the passive indicator. It's not an active red light, but it's a passive indicator where it's like, ooh, something's not right here. It may not be explicit, but it's kind of doing the statistical analysis. And I like to say this when I talk about failure points. I got one indicator. Okay, it's an indicator. I got two. Now I need to keep a look at this. I need to focus in and see what's going on here. Start asking some questions. By the time I have the third indicator, the third instance, that's when I'm really paying attention. And I'm going, look, we've got a pattern, and now we need to address it because the overall health of the team is being impacted, and these are the three distinct instances and the data that backed it all up. And oh, by the way, the common person, or maybe even a couple of people that are involved in this. And it's a lot of it is going to be gut. So I can't give you that a definitive answer as to go, oh yeah, you got your checklist here and up, check. It's oftentimes working through your humanity and going, this doesn't set right. This doesn't feel right. And I'm a huge believer that in many ways we are given opportunities to show up for each other in moments where we least expect it, and we work from the standpoint of we're all human beings and we've got stuff running both in our professional life and outside of our professional life. And it's how we choose to engage with the other person, and especially when you're in a leadership position, because it is really that responsibility as leaders that we have to identify this stuff and to find an appropriate path, and of course enlist assistance outside of the team within the organization to bring the right folks together and to have those tough conversations. Certainly caring enough and being kind, but to say, look, I'm seeing this, and I just need to understand where it's coming from. And so, for me, I'm pretty hard-headed. I think that's the reason I was able to make a career out of the military. But I am also a recovering perfectionist, and so as a result, I have had more than my fair share of moments where I couldn't hear myself over my own awesomeness, which led to the title of the whole presentation. And because of where I started professionally in an elite community and then moving into a more elite community in the military, I pushed myself and I pushed others to the point where, truth be told, I've made some bad choices and I have lifetimes of regrets. So one of my mentors, a guy by the name of Tim, who was a retired Navy SEAL, he said to me, and this was such a huge affirmation for me at the time, because I was working in the special operations community as an operations support and an intelligence support person. He said, Tim, you've got the heart of that we look for in the teams, but your body just couldn't take the physical punishment to make it through the training. And for me, that was huge, high praise. And I'm saying this because, number one, I am not a great athlete, and number two, I have a color vision deficiency. And finally, when I joined the Navy, I couldn't type fast enough to be a journalist. So, I was like, man, great, cool. I got a SEAL who's telling me that if I were physically better, I could probably make it through. And I share this mainly because I am my own worst enemy to learning and practicing team enabling behavior. So I am not perfect in any way, shape, or form. But I've had a lot of good coaching advice. And like I mentioned earlier, this is that point where I'm going to pull the curtain back a little bit. And one of my best friends, and I actually posted a picture of us together on LinkedIn. He's been my best friend for 20 years, and we met each other at Carnival Cruise while we were working for Carnival Cruise in Miami. And he gave me some really hard straight talk a few years after I left the submarine force, but prior to join the special operations community in the reserve. He said to me that my willingness to cut corners to achieve the next goal or objective was holding me back, and it was causing me problems. And I had not considered at that point professionally what that impact was. That it's like, oh, if I can get from A to B and I get to cut across the field to get there, what does that hurt? But it was creating a space for my hero complex to show up because I was that guy who was always, what is it? Where do I need to be at what time? And I'm going to be there 5 minutes early. And yeah, his willingness to tell me that unvarnished truth, it really hit me hard, to the point where I felt like I needed to look at my motives, and I needed to search my soul and go, is what he's saying true? Can I find factual basis for this? And, sure enough, he was right. I was wrong. And we are still friends today. So I adjusted my attitude and my behavior, and I started putting in the hard work to get the good results that I wanted without cutting those corners. And I'm going to say this because this is a reality. Not every one of our teammates is going to be able to handle those blood assessments. Byron, I think, we had built up enough trust to where he was willing to risk the friendship to get me pointed in the right direction. That was huge on his part. I think about it, and each one of us has our own self-doubts. We've got influencing feelings going on. We've got negative emotions running around, and personal struggles, the shadows of, past failure. It's always running around in the back of our head. And so if the person who's exhibiting this hero complex is the type who might not be able to receive that direct feedback in the moment when the behavior is showing up, then it's kind of that warning: proceed with care, proceed with caution and empathy, and figure out what the right time is for that. Hopefully it's not too far down the road and you've got cumulative moments where that happens, but also dig into your own experience, especially if you've gotten to this place where you know what that looked like for you, and now you're in that coaching position. You can bring that forward and have a good positive conversation. One of the things that I tend to lead with is probing questions. How's your day? How are things at home? That's going to be my gauge for whether or not it's a good time to have that straight talk. So that feedback, from the other person, helps me in my timing. Now, I will say that once you've gone through this process of making sense of the situation, if it's a no-go, then you try to figure out, okay, how quickly can we get to this? Picking the right time, picking the right place. Omar and I were talking about this, the remote work. It makes it even more challenging sometimes, because if somebody's working remotely and you're trying to have that conversation, you don't have the body language to go by to figure out where they're at, they're crossing their arms or whatnot. So it becomes more and more tricky. There's even when you've got everything planned and set up and you want to have that conversation, there's still a bit of sense making that goes on in the moment while you're working through the examples. And it's a dynamic conversation. So it may be, as you're looking, you're speaking to the specific behavior and trying to give them examples of what team enabling behavior looks like. You get to a point where the person's feeling overwhelmed in the conversation. It may be an appropriate time to back off. and kind of take a step back to say, okay, now that I've provided you this feedback, I think it may be a good idea for us to, maybe let that sit before we go on to what the next steps are. It's perfectly acceptable to break these types of conversations up, to give that person the time to process what's been said, and then to come back and visit, what the actions are, or where things need to go, and put together, co-create a plan to move in the opposite direction, away from the behavior that's creating the problems. Um, and this may or may not be new for you guys. I don't want to assume it is. So if you've got some questions, I'm more than happy to field them. And I'm going to take uncomfortable silences that, yeah, this is, by the way, this is what I do to my teams quite frequently. It's like, look, I can sit here for 45 seconds. Doesn't matter to me. So, yeah.
Well, I'll speak up and then just say that as I'm hearing you, it's very eye-opening. Thank you for being vulnerable, because some of the challenges of leading people are that it's lonely at the top. And although in this type of projects from environment, everybody has a piece and you're not really, quote unquote, the leader, but it has to get done some kind of way. And there are times where the cape has to come on. There are times where the stick has to be used. And there are times where there needs to be I call it a kumbaya moment, where everybody sits around the circle. And it's hard when you're talking about like a lot of military projects, a lot of major things that have to get done. If it doesn't get done, bad things happen. And it's hard in knowing that balance. I guess my only question would be, when do you learn to kind of shift from the hero complex and to be more like the herd? And how does that transition look like?
This is that tipping point in my experience usually is arrived after a moment of shared suffering where things went really badly, or shared victory. Because if the team is taking some time to be retrospective about the work and what's been done, there is that open space for vulnerability and feedback. And I am a firm believer, and I've been living this for probably the better part of 15 years now, that those retrospective moments, those look backs to, hey, we've been working really hard for the last month or two. What has been contributing to our success? What are the things that are holding us back? And what are the things that we want to improve on? Those can be that watershed moment where the team really does align. And it becomes that pivot point where it's like, dang, I did not know we were, so-and-so and such and such. I didn't know that we were doing it, poorly. Not wrong, but just poorly. And then we talk about, well, how do we improve that? How do we make that different? And I think the most important, and I have to work on this. My goodness, I am so conscious of this today. I work on my language and how things come across. If I want a team to be successful, it's we. It's not me or you, it's us. Cultivating the right language and celebrating success, frequent success, even in small measure, becomes kind of a catalyst. It is like a recipe. Notice I said a recipe. It's not the recipe, but a recipe to kind of rotate that over and have the team moving in a unified direction, as a herd. And project managers and scrum masters and agile coaches, then we get to be the sheep herders. We're right along there, you know, we're heading in the same direction. It's just that we're more aware of where the guardrails are, where the fences are, where the potholes in the road are, where we're going to meet traffic at the turn and the bend, and we can be ahead, and we can go start steering around the impediments. You know, and it's practice, because there's no magic formula for any of that, James. You know, but I will say that mentoring and being part of a community of practice and really investing time to learn and grow from others, it's been hugely beneficial to me, especially in my work in different companies. Even now, we have a weekly lean coffee that all the agile practitioners are invited to now. Typically, depending upon schedules, we get about on the upside a dozen people showing up. On the lean side, it's maybe 3 or 4. But boy, we put those questions out, the most pressing questions, to the group to say, all right, I don't have a good handle on this. What does the collective wisdom of the crowd say? We cultivate in our company a culture of transparency, because we want to trust one another, and when we do that, we're able to carry that over to our clients, which is huge. And we even have a client right now, and so this is kind of aside, but it still goes down this path of building team trust, and specifically looking at that the power of TED, the empowerment dynamic triangle, where culturally the company was in a position where a lot of the IT staff was looking for a way out. One of the senior executives brought us in as a team to do some work for the company, and in the meanwhile was observing the behavior of the team on site and going, what do you guys do differently? and the conversation around the speed of trust, which is a book that Stephen M. R. Covey wrote, came to the surface. And I actually get to the speed of the trust, and so that's part of the presentation. But then it became such that they invited us in to start helping them restore trust and build trust and grow trust within their own teams. So occasionally we get this rare opportunity to walk in and not be the savior of an organization, but to be able to demonstrate the right behavior where we're all pulling in the same direction. We all understand what needs to get done. We do have creative friction. So, I think that's always going to be part of the team dynamic, but we figured out the right language so that no one person is showing up and doing the heroic lifting, and we're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but we do have a pretty good track record, and we ask for forgiveness when we screw it up. Yeah. So I hope that.
Go ahead. Sorry.
So James, I hope in a long roundabout way that kind of answers your question, because I know I touched on a lot of stuff, but it's all part of that mix.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're talking about a process, and it's never clear cut and perfect. Having worked with different teams in different arenas, I can kind of relate a little bit. But you're talking about some very specific things, so I was very curious on that. If kind of what kind of path you took, because I think it's all useful, it's all valuable as you're working through not only just projects, you're working through processes, but you're working with people. You manage resources, but you at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I do make the distinction. I manage things and I lead people. Now, whether people choose to follow, that's up to them. And I've gotten past that. Well, I want you all moving. You know what? We've got choices to make, and especially given the fact that we chose a company to be part of, and we could choose not to be a part of that company or move into a different area of the company. I mean, that's the greatest thing. We've got a lot of the military. On the other hand, yeah, there's pretty well defined things that you can and cannot do. So you volunteer to be voluntold. you know, but I have I have taken away from that, and I've switched the way that I lead. You know, so for me, being the coach is the right thing. It's like I'm just telling what I foresee potentially happening going forward, because I do a pretty good job of assessing risk before it becomes an issue. But the choice is yours. And here's what we could do in the meanwhile to potentially not have that become a material issue. No guarantee, but then this is where that transparent planning and active communication come into it. Because as leaders, and I think Dwight Eisenhower said it best: plans are of no consequence, but planning is essential. Got to be planning all the time. And as a leader, you've got to be planning for your best case scenario and your worst case scenario almost all consistently. And yeah, it's people, and people are the problem most of the time, but also people are part of the solution. So Omar, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. I have to echo James's his words on your vulnerability. I think it helps cement the understanding a lot better. Now, and I mean this with the real specific admiration for your vulnerability, but I agree with what your Navy SEAL friend told you, that you had the heart. And right now you have pretty much, with your example, placed what is the biggest necessity for anybody to come out of that hero complex. And it's the ability to accept that feedback and then to make the best of what that feedback was given. So you've showed the heart, and I would say you would have been a hell of a SEAL, because there's something that Simon Sinek talks about when he talks of the different quadrants of the SEALs about between trust and performance.
Yes.
You definitely would have created the high trust. So, but on the other hand, you did mention that when you see this behavior, you have to know in the state of mind that person is to have a conversation and fix this. Many people are not willing to have it. So you explaining and you being very transparent about how much work you have to put in on a daily, it's more it just opens up to the struggles that it could be that, hey, it could be as easy or as hard you need it to be.
Yep.
But as long as you're willing to put in the work, then you'll get to that goal.
Exactly. And and this is kind of where I reached this critical point. And I didn't know, and Omar, you and I were talking about my last deployment, because I deployed twice. It was a professional. I felt very convicted as a senior enlisted leader that if I didn't deploy and I was asking my sailors to do something I wasn't willing to do, that was the wrong answer. So the second deployment was really rough. So much so that when I got back, and I was actually in a job hunting mode, and so Omar's heard this. My family was young. Our daughters were in between that. They were early elementary school aged, and I'm looking for work in Afghanistan, and I'm trying to land my next gig, land the gig. It moves me from Miami to Dallas, and because I was for a good part of my career, I've been operationally focused, not necessarily on the project side of the business. I just embraced my new role, my new responsibilities as a manager at Verizon, but I was neglecting the impact of what I had experienced supporting combat operations for special operations units. And so I didn't realize until I was sidelined as a result of a merger and acquisition situation where Verizon sold the portion of the business that I was part of, and I was one senior manager too many at that point, how post-traumatic stress was influencing a lot of my behavior and interaction with my team. And so it finally got to that point where I was in a really bad place. And I had to go to the VA because it was affecting what remained between the relationships that I had with my wife and our daughters. And so I went through about a year's worth of treatment, and there was a lot of things that came out that again, this self-discovery where I went, holy crap. I was not addressing some of the systemic things that were influencing my behavior and, drawing this, hey, I got to save the day out of me. I like to refer to it, it's kind of like, when a building is booby trapped in an action movie, that was the way my head was operating. I had different stuff that was all wired in, that because of where I was at and what I was doing and the risk involved, and I want to get home, and I want to get home in one piece. I was one of those guys who was wired for vigilance, wired for looking for threats. Doesn't work well when you're trying to have a meaningful relationship with your family, moreover, your coworkers. But because I didn't take time to deal with that, I was rushing into the burning building. Not, metaphorically, but, and I was just like, why is this not working for me? And of course, I put in the work. I sat and spoke with a VA psychologist for the better part of the year. It revealed a lot of these things to me, and it made me go, crap. Okay, that explains a lot of these outcomes. And to this point, I was functioning in a position of anxiety. I was out of work for almost a year and a half. And I say out of work because I was picking up part-time jobs and some consulting stuff, but nothing sustainable for the long run. So, recognizing all of that, getting healthy, really helped me to be able to make this statement. And I said it earlier, which is we're all dealing with a certain amount of trauma in life. We're all dealing with situations that are coloring our ability to identify things that are working in the team dynamic and things that are not working in the team dynamic. And for me, it was this, hey, now I've got a clinical problem, and I need to get the treatment that's going to get me healthy again and get additional tools in order to manage my new normal. And I literally walk through the day, every single day, going, you know what? I don't have the same life that I had back in 2010 or back in 2000. I have a different life. So I have a different set of things that I'm working through, and it gets better and better every day. I am less anxiety focused. I am now more passion based and outcome focused in the way that I work. But I guarantee you that we've got, in any one of our teams, we've got people who have similar experiences, and this being able to relate in some form or fashion is really critical to kind of bringing this stuff to the surface. Because, James, you said it best. Sometimes we're doing this stuff where our teams, members of our teams are doing this stuff and they don't even know it. But it's because it's like, we get our business, John Cotter refers to it as the burning platform. And I think the book is Leading Change or something of that nature. But it's like the business is on fire. Everybody, grab a bucket. We got to put it out. And it's this is where I share from is this is the hard stuff that I think we're not taking into account in the team dynamic. And I have a great deal of respect now, more so than ever before, when people are willing to receive that feedback. And by the way, there are going to be people who are not in a position to listen to it, let alone receive it. And then that's an HR problem. That is a problem that is bigger than any one of us at a team level can deal with. That may be that conversation, and I've had this conversation, and it was tough. My HR business partner and I, we actually sat in her office for an hour formulating how we were going to address this with one of my former engineers at Verizon, because I had nearly a half a ream of paper on this guy. That's how bad it was. But it was negligence. It wasn't even like he wanted to be successful. I had the opposite in that particular case. So I've seen some pretty extreme behavior, but I go back to, I'm a human being. Every one of us deserves to be treated with kindness and with respect, and especially when it comes to dear friends and family, with love. Kindness is being willing to say, look, I see some stuff here. I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but I genuinely care about you, and I want you to be successful. I want you to be able to live and work in a way that's going to be beneficial to you and the people around you. And Omar, by the way, I do receive that, and I deeply appreciate it. I've delivered on this topic probably this maybe the fifth or sixth time. It gets easier because like my leading comment about this being open space, we're here because we're supposed to be here. This is not really about me. This is just about, what? I've got some stuff I've learned along the way. I read this somewhere, and I'm huge on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn because I get a lot of great insight from LinkedIn. Somebody said a TA can be an excellent professor and nobody would even know it because they're 2 or 3 chapters ahead of where the class is. This is me just being 2 or 3 chapters ahead in this. It's like, yeah, you know what? I'm still trying to figure it out. Sometimes I get it, sometimes I don't. And in all of this, my hardest pivot really was that transition out of the military, not having a purpose-driven team around me, and trying to figure out where I fit in business culture and how I could best contribute. And of course, dealing with past decisions and the outcomes of that stuff. And it's helped me by reading books like The Power of Ted, hone in on those things that I go, okay, now I can do a mapping exercise. Now I can say to people, and actually my boss did the graphics for me because we were talking through this presentation long before I ever delivered it, I think for the first time about 2 years ago now. And it's good because I can be authoritative enough to get you interested in doing some deeper learning, and I can also point you in the direction for where I've learned, which that's the big takeaway. I'm giving you an opportunity to equip yourselves to kind of look at this and make your own assessment. And again, it goes back to that whole fishing thing. I'm not an expert in anything. In fact, I'm a really good generalist who is marginally successful in the whole planning process, and that's the reason why I ended up getting into being an agile coach, a scrum master, a project manager when needed. So anyhow, enough on that. This is really my favorite part of the whole presentation. So this this graphic actually comes out of Stephen M. R. Covey's The Speed of Trust. And I like the way it represents, because it is very much like dropping a rock into a pond and seeing the ripple effect. Trust starts with us. If we can't trust ourselves, it's going to definitely have an impact on the people that we work with, especially when we're in that position of influence as a leader. So that extends into relational trust and subsequently organizational trust. And this is really where most of us operate in these three areas. I like to think about the fact that if a team member isn't able to trust him or herself, how in the world are they going to be able to trust the folks to the right or the left of them? It's a really basic, it's a fundamental question. In everything leading up to this point, where we've talked about some of this behavior, we've talked about how to address this behavior, but this is the nuts and bolts of restoring trust and recognizing that, it may be things that are really external to us that have run in the background that we're just unaware of. But there is a way to do this, and a way to get that person who's got that hero complex on board and functioning to the benefit of the team. I like to think around the subtle cues, especially when the conversation is concluded and there's a desire to have a more positive outcome in the team dynamic, where if you saw somebody on the team behaving a certain way, you may have a cue word, or a phrase like, ooh, I see some heavy lifting going on there, or we're all heroes here. Little things, little prompts that make it more evident that it's like, ooh, okay, so and so is slipping back into this. Okay, it's time to bring them back back into the fold, as it were. I look to that point as well, to equip the team and give the hero an opportunity to help raise everybody's performance, or the heroes. That it's like, look, let's create a training session where you get to showcase what you're great at, and we raise the overall proficiency of everybody around us. And that way they walk away with that recognition, and they really do become the go-to person. In the meanwhile, the people around them that have the aptitude are getting to their level, and this is that succession planning. And somebody at a certain point in time, somebody's going to move off, and we need to have a replacement identified to be able to fill in that gap. I think about it from that standpoint of, we are constantly pressed in business today to continue to raise the level of performance, because there are a lot of competitors out in the market. And we know, and we've seen this, whether it be Amazon or, Apple is a really good example. Google certainly. Amazon's day one mentality pushes Amazonians to always be thinking about improvement. And at a team level, and especially if we've got some behavior that is eroding trust, this is a good set of tools to get that back to where it needs to be. Looking at the speed of trust and developing these just-in-time heroes along the way, as well as that, equipping for the replacement over the course of time. So we are almost done, gentlemen. I know Carla had to drop. So any questions about this? Because I'm a huge fan of the speed of trust. I don't know if you guys have heard of it or read the book, but good. Thanks, James.
I'm actually looking for it right now.
Excellent. Excellent. I've got my copy sitting over on my yep, it's right over here.
Yeah. It's in my library. I was exposed to that some years ago. Very good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And to the point, and we're so I'm one of the leaders in our Dallas office, and I host a Trust Pod conversation every Monday morning for about a half an hour.
Oh wow.
That is that, and it's me and my colleagues. And so I kind of set the topic, and then we have the conversation. And you know, we look at everything from sales, because one of our colleagues is in the sales department, another one's in training. A couple of us are in delivery. You know, we talk about the whole gamut, and we also talk about the how this impacts us on a personal level outside of work. You know, and I really love what my colleague Alana has said, and she said it numerous occasions, which is this is a language all of us can learn. You know, and build shared understanding, and of course, be able to recognize those breaks really quickly, and then you know go back and do the right thing and apologize, make amends, which I'm getting better at. My wife could tell you. You know, but this works in the team environment too, and I have had on occasion, you know, in fact, shoot, my last, not my current client, but my last client, I had a product owner who, you know, I went like this on a team call, and it didn't even take me today. I went back and apologized to him, and I said, man, I'm sorry I came across that way. I was really being a jerk. It wasn't you, it's just the way you were coming across. And we worked it out, and we were really successful from that point going forward. Yeah. But there is that self-awareness piece and the recognition that, hey, you know, you got some work to do from time to time, because sometimes you just step into the middle of it. So anyway, you know, I don't want to really labor the point. I think you guys get the whole build capability, you know, encourage the entire team to rise up together, you know, allow that hero to be in a lead position, especially when it's their competency, their skills and abilities that need to be built into the remainder of the team. Really, I wanted to talk about, you know, that shift, and David Emerald even says it, you know, shifts happen, you know, this recognition of, you know, hey, I no longer have to think and act in this dreaded drama triangle way. I can be operating from the empowerment triangle. For me, that was a hugely pivotal moment. And I will say that it allows me a degree of personal space to be objective oftentimes. And for leaders especially, I think this is a critical thing, which is when we can disconnect that sense of accomplishment, or, you know, the outcome focus or the goal focus, and say, look, this is really, even though I'm a member of this team, even though I'm trying to influence behavior, at the end of the day, this may not be, and it certainly shouldn't be about me. This is about something else in the team dynamic that we have to work on. You know, it takes a lot of the emotional energy and the charge and the negative, you know, connotations out of that equation, and really puts us in the right position to be able to work through this. And sometimes that restoration process can take weeks, months. Not impossible, but of course organizational constraints are there too. So it's, you know, I like to see things move quickly. That's my preference. But I also realize that if we've got somebody who's really kind of fixed, and it takes more time than what the organization is willing to allow, there may be a tougher conversation to come out of it. You know, but you know, this is really the crux of what we're talking about, which is how do we restore trust once it's broken? How do we grow trust within the team? How do we get out of this thinking of being a victim, or being you know, the persecutor, which is really worse, or even the rescuer who's enabling bad behavior, to shifting things to being a creator, challenger, or coach. You know, and these two books have been really informative for me. I hope if you decide to get copies yourself, you'll find as much value as I've found in learning from them. And like everything, I wanted to just kind of summarize everything. These were really the three key points that I hope that you get out of it. Recognizing this behavior, encouraging an alternative behavior amongst the members of the team, as well as whoever that is or whoever they are that are exhibiting this hero complex, and raising everybody's game in the process to restore trust. So we are, oh, wow, dude, we are at the time box, Omar.
Yes.
Dude,
Yeah,
I brought it right in for the landing. This is great.
Yeah. No, I have to say, I was not gonna say anything. It's a very small crowd today. I'm not gonna shy away from it. Hey, it's obvious. But I have a huge respect for the military. My father was in the Air Force. My grandfather was in the Air Force. My biggest regret was not being part of the military myself. Seeing and hearing from your journey, your vulnerability, your process has been not only insightful, enlightening, but has given me a much new appreciation for the military that I already had. It just built upon it even more. So thank you for your service. Thank you for sharing this with us. James, thank you for being here. And honestly, this is probably my most favorite session that I've had in a very long time. And this is nothing bad against the previous speakers, but this really, I guess, call me biased towards military, but this just, to me, just lands a lot deeper. So thank you very much for coming. And if you guys don't mind, let's take a quick photo so I can post this session on LinkedIn. Let me go ahead here.
And no, I'm not frozen.
No, I know. So 1, 2, and 3. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
And I deeply appreciate the fact that you've invested this time and listened to me. I learned something early on, which is you always want to be responsible to your audience. You're not responsible for your audience. So I receive the compliment, Omar, and it really is out of my heart for people to be better that I share. And I was extraordinarily blessed. I like to wrap things up. I feel like John Elway because I deployed to Afghanistan twice, and so I have my Lombardi Trophy from like when Elway was with the Colts and then Denver Broncos, and I'm like, I went out, I played my game, I played hard, I was able to walk away from the game, and now I get to share, and provide some insight, and hopefully it's beneficial to everybody who gets a chance to hear me.
Thank you very much. I hope it is. But thank you for your book recommendations. They are in the cart and ready to be checked out.
Excellent.
Tim, real quick, what was the other book? I know Speed of Trust. And what was the other one?
The Power of 10.